The Panthers have done everything in their power to make sure Bryce Young has a much better second season than his first. We discussed the 2024 fantasy outlook for the entire Carolina Panthers offense on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst for NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. We are going through all 32 teams, giving them each their own episode and talking about their 2024 fantasy outlook for all of their offensive players of note. We're almost halfway through the league because we only have one NFC team left. That's the Carolina Panthers. We're going to dig into them today. Not a super exciting team last year, but there's more hope this season. So worst team in the NFL in terms of record, finished at 2-15. And unfortunately, they gave away the first overall pick already because they traded with the Bears to move up for Bryce Young the year prior. Averaged the tied for worst points per game in the NFL with the Patriots. Averaged the second fewest fantasy points per game in the league, ahead of only the New York Jets. So it wasn't a pretty year, right? Bryce Young looked terrible in his rookie season, but they've changed a lot of things to make improvements this year. They changed head coaches, brought in quarterback whisperer Dave Canales to be the new head coach. They added Diontae Johnson for Bryce Young, who's a really reliable kind of possession receiver. They added Xavier Legette in the first round, added tight end Jonathon Sanders, and then also drafted the best running back in the draft in Jonathon Brooks in the second round. Spent some money to fix up the interior offensive line. So there's looks to be some hope this year for the Panthers. Let's start off with the guy that will decide it all, right? And that's Bryce Young. If he doesn't get better, then this team's going to stink again for fantasy. He ended as a quarterback 41 in fantasy points per game last year, quarterback 23 overall. Vinny, tell me what you expect from Bryce Young in his second season. Will he see that Dave Canales effect?
Yeah, being in the epicenter of where the Panthers are getting ready for the season in Charlotte, there's some guarded optimism, I would say, about Bryce Young being better. The other thing is he can only be better because he was really bad last year, and this offense really didn't do much. This is why they blew up everything so quickly with Frank Reich and turned the page to Dave Canales, who has a great history. Now, this is this first young quarterback he's dealing with here of late. He turned around Geno Smith. He turned around Baker Mayfield. Both of them became fantasy viable under Dave Canales' watch here. So that's promising. That's a good start. I think the offense is also going to be a little bit more open-minded. Everyone thinks they still might be conservative. They have pretty good defense, but they did lose some key pieces there. So keep that in mind. They have Brian Burns, Frankie Louvu, some guys that were making some plays on the other side. So this defense is not going to be as good. They're going to have to open it up and throw it a little bit more. They can't just get away with hiding Bryce Young. And I don't think they want to, Michelle. Like you mentioned, they added Johnson, they added Legette, they added Sanders. They want to open things up. They wouldn't do all that if they weren't concerned with the passing game. They still have Jonathan Mingo lingering in the background. Adam Thelen was a reliable slot guy. So all the weapons are really there for Bryce Young to be productive. Now, do I see a massive season from him? No. I just don't see that's where these weapons all add up to, because we've seen Diontae Johnson, the Steelers' offense wasn't all that good last year with the quarterback issues, right? So he needs to have that quarterback operating better. Legette, we'll see with him and Mingo. So let's just figure out where we would go with these weapons. So I just look at this. He has to be better. He's going to be better protected. They invested a lot in guard when you look at Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis. So I think they expect quite a bit from him, but looking at where he was last year, QB 41, right now he's QB 26. Now keep that in mind. That's already a big jump, but that also keeps him out of QB2 range. So that's where I'm looking at here. These weapons are still kind of middle to bottom to me. So again, I don't think he has top 12 upside, but in terms of being a top 20 quarterback, that's within reach for him, I think, this year.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say he can have a Baker Mayfield type year from last year. Now, Baker, I liked his weapons a little bit more with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, but I do think Diontae Johnson's a really, really solid wide receiver. I think it comes down to what Xavier Legette can be in his first year, right? He's that big-bodied, fast wide receiver. If he can truly be a DK Metcalf type player in year one, that would change things for Bryce Young a bit, because I don't think just Diontae Johnson's going to change it all for him. Adam Thielen's turning 34 years old. We don't know what he has left in the tank. So maybe top 15 upside, kind of where Baker was last year. I think that's fair. If you're in a 2-quarterback league, because I don't think you're thinking about Bryce Young in a 1-quarterback league, but in 2-quarterback leagues, if you're looking at some guy late as your QB2 or maybe your QB3 for depth, would you rather Bryce Young or Daniel Jones?
Yeah, this is interesting. I think Daniel Jones I would prefer as a backup actually in 1 QB leagues, because you can find the right matchup and he has some running ability that you could plug him in. But if you're looking for upside and a guy that could put up some numbers that to supplement your top quarterback, I would think you have to go with Bryce Young, because he just is in a better situation with his youth and trajectory, where we've seen them try to fix Daniel Jones. The only thing that props up Daniel Jones is rushing here is really his just athleticism. I think that's his biggest thing that he has on his side here. And otherwise, the passing, if you look at it, I think I would feel a lot more comfortable with Bryce Young producing than Daniel Jones.
I think I'd go Daniel Jones side because of the rushing, because he got Malik Neighbors. I just trust Neighbors to be a true top tier wide receiver 1 compared to any of the guys on the Panthers. So I lean Daniel Jones here. I think he has higher upside and same risk. But what about I think this is a harder question to ask. Both guys going into their second season, Bryce Young or Will Levis? Who would you rather take the shot on to break out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's been a lot of Will Levis buzz as a sleeper and a breakout player. But again, I think Will Levis has better weapons, but I think Bryce Young might be the better talent, if that makes sense. So I think with his skill set, it's pretty close. But I think I would say it's fair that I would put them really close as some upside guys to target late in drafts. And I think with Levis, I still think there's going to be an element of taking pressure off him with the running game a little bit more than we think, even though they're opening it up there. And I just like maybe the pecking order weapons that Bryce Young has. But again, neither of them putting up big rushing totals is really going to curb them down into the 20s at quarterback at best.
If you told me one of these guys broke out as a top 8 quarterback, I would lean more the Will Levis way. I do think he has a higher ceiling, but in terms of taking a quarterback 2 or 3, I'm going to lean the Bryce Young way over Will Levis. I think he's a little bit safer to improve this year, so I'd go with him. We're going to talk about all of Bryce Young's wide receivers because it's a crowded group. I mean, there's no real true guy at the top, right? It's a confusing group. It's a crowded group, but there should be some fantasy value to be had in the Carolina Panthers receiving room. We have to figure this out. So that's what you and I are going to do in our next segment right after we hear from one of our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the GameTime app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you'll have. It is baseball season, and I've used this app so many times to buy my baseball tickets, especially when I lived in a city with a stadium. You just go on that day, and you know they're going to have your back, and it's going to be super, super easy to use, and you know it's going to be the cheapest tickets you can find anywhere. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps and you're set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's start with the most expensive wide receiver to draft among these Panthers wide receivers. It's Diontae Johnson, and he's not too expensive. I mean, he's sitting there with wide receiver 38 costs, 78th overall. Last year was not a good year for him. He was injured some of the time and also playing with Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky. And I mean, Mason Rudolph was good for George Pickens and Diontae, but still not the best guy to be playing with, right? So finishes as a wide receiver 39 in points per game last year. Just the last 2 seasons, he's been in a terrible system with a terrible quarterback. What do you expect from him now that he's going with the Panthers, which last year was a terrible quarterback and system, but we can hope for better this year?
Yeah, it's very interesting. His points per game, his ranking is almost identical to that. He was at RB 38, and now he's ranked at, wide receiver 38, ranked at wide receiver 39 now. So I don't get that. I mean, he should be more involved. He doesn't have to deal with some dissension. There was definitely some tension there with the Steelers passing game. We don't know if him and George Pickens got along. We don't know if he really liked the ugly quarterback situation. Now I think he's a little bit settled and he wants to prove himself. I think he's going to go in thinking that he's the clear number one here. Adam Thielen's a fading slot here. Xavier Legette is a rookie, still learning the ropes, and we'll see what Mingo can do. But you figure Diontae Johnson is going to lead this team in targets. So that's a good start right away. The Young is going to look for him all over the field. He's a very good route runner. I think the biggest thing that we knocked on him early was his hands, but I think he's kind of corrected that as well. So I really like Diontae Johnson, the player. I think he's a very good technician with his route running. I think he'll get open and be schemed open quite a bit well here for Bryce Young. So I think this is one of the better values on the board. I think he's a forgotten talent here in a way, that he's a really good player. I don't think he's exciting, but I think if you're looking for a wide receiver 3 that you can rely upon most weeks rather than not, I think you go there. Then you can kind of balance them out, get like that really studly wide receiver 1, get a high upside wide receiver 2 with youth. Then you get Diontae Johnson as your wide receiver 3, essentially kind of replacing what Adam Thielen was as a Panther for much of last season.
Yeah, if he just gets, like, the last time we've seen him with a somewhat good quarterback, right? Like Ben Roethlisberger at 39, 38 years old with pretty much no elbow left. He was a wide receiver 10 in points per game in 2021. Like, he got all the targets and he scored 8 touchdowns. If Bryce Young can just be like 39-year-old Ben Roethlisberger, there's a chance, right? Like, I don't think Bryce Young will ever be like Ben Roethlisberger will be 10 times the quarterback than he ever will be. But at 39 years old, that's not what Ben was anymore. He's kind of over and done, and that's why he retired. So I do think like there's a shot that he could be really good in this offense with if Bryce Young can take that step forward. Now, the question, though, is like, will there be enough touchdown opportunities for Diontae to be a top 18, 15 wide receiver? Because last year, DJ Chark, who's no longer with the Panthers, he led the team with 5 touchdowns. Like, what do you think really is a ceiling for Diontae in terms of touchdown scores this year?
Yeah, probably like 8, I'm going to go with. I think
that would be really good.
Yeah, that's a hard to double-digit project touchdowns for guys that are not like Adam Thielen, right, who go up and get the ball and are just kind of red zone monsters here, or Mike Evans that are just targeted because of their size, where Diontae Johnson's a little bit smaller. He's more of that technical receiver, but I think you can get 6 to 8, and that should be good enough here. And I think there's a really good shot based on his target volume. It may be lower per catch type of average here, but if he gets enough volume here, catches 80 balls, there's a chance that he would get 1,000 yards. And now that wouldn't be spectacular, but it would definitely put him in the wide receiver 3 range, which is what we're looking for. He's right out of that cusp right now with his ranking in ADP.
So there's 3 wide receivers going back to back to back in drafts. It's DeAndre Hopkins, Diontae Johnson, and Rashee Rice. Rank those 3 guys for me.
Oh, this is tough because we don't know what's going to happen with Rashee Rice missing time. But all things considered, the player, I go with Rashee Rice. He's just a more important part of his offense, and we know where he was at the end of last year. With the other 2, it gets a little bit more interesting. I think Jordan Addison might have better value early if TJ Hawkinson's on the shelf, but I think Diontae Johnson longer term will probably be a better wide receiver 3 this season. And looking at DeAndre Hopkins, I have no interest in DeAndre Hopkins. I just don't like that situation. There's too many other mouths to feed all of a sudden with Calvin Ridley, and we'll see if Treylon Burks is a factor. It's just getting a little bit messy there with the Titans, with the targets. So I trust Diontae Johnson to get more. So I think if I had to go with it, Rice, if he's not suspended, well over Diontae Johnson, then Johnson over the other 2.
Yeah, I'm going with Rice too. Even if he's suspended 3 or fewer games, like I'm still going with Rice over that group. Then Diontae, and then like I'm with you. I have no interest in DeAndre Hopkins, and it's still, I don't know, Jordan Addison. If we put him in this group too, I think I lean Addison over Diontae, but that one's a really close one. Now, Adam Thielen last year, he came out of the gates cooking, right? I mean, from weeks 1 through 8, he was the wide receiver 7 in points per game, averaging over 16 fantasy points per game in half PPR, averaging 10 targets per game during that span. And then he finishes as a wide receiver 31 in points per game on the year, because the second half of the year, he was wide receiver 59 from weeks 9 through 18 in points per game. Everything just plummeted for him. The targets, the catch percentage, the touchdowns, he had 0 during that span. Fantasy points, he averaged 6.6 fantasy points per game from weeks 9 through 18. Turning 34 years old in August. Does he have anything left in the tank, especially now that Diontae Johnson's there?
Yeah, I keep writing off Adam Thielen like, okay, he's going to slow down. He's not able to do anything. He's getting older. Now, it's very shocking how he kind of got rolling as the default number 1 last year, but you saw things kind of break down for him later, and that's why they'd upgrade so much. So he's not going to eat up the same level of targets. And I think Johnson coming really hurts him because he's another technician who can make a lot of plays all over the field. Now, Thielen still is going to be a good red zone weapon. He always has been. I mean, Kirk Cousins kind of revived that a little bit in his last seasons with the Vikings. But Thielen's a guy you just can't count out. He's probably going to hang around and do some things here, but there's no way that he's going to finish as wide receiver 3 on average again. I mean, it's going to be more like that wide receiver 59 we saw late last year. So that's why he's going wide receiver 67. I think that's fair. I mean, the drop off, from the back half of last year, why would you think things are going to go up for him? They added more guys. They're spreading the ball around a little bit more. They have actually a big tight end that they might factor in with Sanders here with his size in the red zone, and that could be a bigger factor here. So, yeah, different offense as well. So I don't think this suits Adam Thielen well at all.
Yeah, Adam Thielen's off my radar. Like, he was totally a volume-based play last year. When he got the 10 targets, he was good. When he didn't, he wasn't good. And with adding Diontae Johnson and Xavier Legette, who, by the way, is going only 10 overall picks after Adam Thielen. So they're going very close together. I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of swapped as we get closer to the season. First round pick, they traded up to get him. So they traded up from the first pick in the second round to the last pick in the first round to make sure they get that 5th-year option for Xavier Legette. But my question is, like, he's that big guy. He didn't break out till late in his college career. He's fast. But was he just destroying people because he was bigger and faster than them in college and older? Or can he actually do that in the NFL? And does he have the skill set to be a 120 plus target guy? I'm not sure. I do think maybe he could be the main red zone target, though. I just don't know how much fantasy value he'll have in year 1.
Yeah, you just have to be patient with Xavier Legette. Now, if you look at the parallels between Dave Canales and the offenses, he's always had a DK Metcalf type. He's always had a Tyler Lockett type. They were the actual DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett a couple years ago. But last year, I would say Mike Evans was the Metcalf type, and Chris Godwin kind of was the Lockett type. So you think Diontae Johnson would be in that possession role of Godwin and Lockett, and they want to get Xavier Legette. I mean, they've targeted this guy a lot in terms of they told him he was going to be drafted even in the 2nd round. So they were locked into him for quite a while. So that says they want him to be that guy. Now, first he has to beat out Jonathon Mingo. We know Thelen is not going to be a competition for him because he's in the slot. So that's really good overall. So I really think it's a high upside coming for Xavier Legette. I don't think it's going to be in year 1. I think year 2, if things light up in this offense a little bit, you get Bryce Young comfortable, then you think you see the explosion for Legette in year 2 because, again, he's built to be that guy. Size, speed, stretch the field, do that damage. So I like his profile, but I think we just have to be a little bit patient. I love him in dynasty leagues.
Yeah, I will say if I'm taking one of these guys in Thelen or Legette late, like I'm taking Legette because he just has more upside, right? And maybe he can play that Mike Evans, DK Metcalf role, and maybe he'll surprise us. We know what Thelen is, and at 34 years old, I don't expect it to get better. Any hope for Jonathon Mingo in year 2? Early 2nd round pick last year. his ADP is just in the garbage, right? Wide receiver 97, 277th overall. So he's really not even being taken in like deeper leagues, only really going late in big dynasty leagues. He was the second most targeted guy on the Panthers last year, but still did absolutely nothing. Any hope for Mingo year 2?
I'm just not interested at all. I mean, yeah, Legette, he's this year's model. I'm going after him. Again, it's going to be Diontae Johnson getting a good value early at wide receiver and dart throw. Legette for some upside maybe later in the season. Otherwise, I'm staying away for the Panthers wide receiver core.
Fair. We got to get into some rookies in our final segment because they brought in 2 more guys in the class, with running back Jonathon Brooks coming off an ACL tear, but was the best running back in the draft. So I'm excited to talk about him. And then my boy, Ja'Tavion Sanders, tight end from Texas. I think he has potential. We'll dig into that to finish up the Carolina Panthers.
Okay, we've been talking a lot about the Carolina Panthers, but how about the Florida Panthers? They're a little bit in danger here of blowing a commanding 3-0 lead in the Stanley Cup Finals. It's down to 3-2 all of a sudden. The Oilers have a game at home here in game number 6, trying to push it to a game 7. I do like the Oilers to keep up their momentum, and they've been scoring a lot of goals here, so I like that. And the best way to get in on that action with the Oilers at minus 122, minus 1.5 goals, is only at FanDuel Sportsbook. We know the NBA Finals are over, but Stanley Cup still is giving you at least one more game. Baseball's coming here. It's summertime. Summer is officially here. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit it out of the park here. So you got hockey, you got the hardball that you can bet on as well. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. All right, Michelle, it is time to close the show. Let's get into some Jonathon Brooks talk. Now, Texas just seems to produce these backs. They had Bijan Robinson, we had Roschon Johnson, and now it's Jonathon Brooks, the next guy here. And you have another guy from Texas. They drafted Ja'Tavion Sanders. Now, Brooks is replacing Miles Sanders in general here in terms of the upside in this backfield and a new offense. So where do we stand on all these guys? I mean, these are just like sleeper fodder altogether. These guys are screaming late picks in your draft.
Yeah, that's the issue with Jonathon Brooks is like right now his ADP sitting at running back 28, 88th overall. But I do think by the time we get to the season, either that's going to be much later or much earlier, right? Because we're going to have more information on how much he's come along with the ACL tear. We're going to see if he's participating in training camp. We're going to see if he's ready for week 1 or not. If he's ready to play in week 1, I do think his ADP rises quite a lot, right? Like we always get excited about rookie running backs, especially when they're drafted early, like Jonathon Brooks. And it's like he was clearly the best running back in the draft. If he didn't tear his ACL, he would have went sooner and we'd be much higher on him in fantasy. But he did tear it in the middle of the season. Maybe he's ready for week 1. He averaged over 140 scrimmage yards per game last year. It ranked 2nd among all Power 5 players. And he has the size, the speed, and the strength to be a 3-down back, right? Also can be that receiving back as well. He doesn't turn 21 until late July. Like he's still 20 years old, 6 foot, 216 pounds. Like he has it all. So I do think if he's healthy and ready to go for training camp, his ADP will rise pretty greatly. Do you agree with me there?
Yeah, I mean, it's already pretty high. I'm going to say RB28 kind of surprised me, 88 overall, but I think we're just looking for that gem here that's going to emerge from a young backfield. Now, talk about Dave Canales and his effect on quarterbacks and wide receivers, but maybe a bit underrated on the running backs because we had Kenneth Walker. I know he wasn't too involved as much as the quarterbacks guy, more in Seattle, but still Kenneth Walker was mainly the guy there. And last year we had Rashad White, and that's good. And I think they do believe in Jonathon Brooks' pass catching ability. So I think this is the only Panthers running back I want to target. I'm just going to be honest, straight up. I mean, Brooks, I want his value to go down. I actually am a little afraid now. RB28 is already pretty high because it puts him just a few spots out of RB2, but I think we're all wise to this, right? I mean, they don't draft Brooks to sit. They have the time to wait for it a little bit. And we know this happens a lot where I remember when we had the Browns and they had Carlos Hyde. You knew Nick Chubb was going to take over at some point, and he just had to get his feet wet here from Georgia, and he took off. And that's going to happen. That at some point, Jonathon Brooks, he's just a much better talent than Chuba Hubbard. Let's be honest. And Miles Sanders was just a guy. They tried to work him in a different system. But I did mention they did upgrade guard, which is important. They could be much better with run blocking on this team, and they're actually pretty decent last year. So again, I still think they're going to pass a little bit more. It could be more of a, I wouldn't say they're going to go nuts, but at least you're looking at the average is kind of 60% of the league. So that's still a good 40 chunk to rush the ball. And if you throw the pass catching, I think there's a lot of upside with Jonathon Brooks, but I don't want handcuff. I don't want any of these other things with any of these other guys. I want to go for Brooks in the home run, and that's it.
Yeah. And listen, we see a rookie running back finish as the top 12 running back, like pretty much every year. There's 2 rookies to do it last year, 1 in 2022, 2 of rookies in 2021, 2 in 2020. There was none in 2019, but Miles Sanders and Josh Jacobs were both top 18 running backs that season. 2 in 2018, 4 in 2017. It's like every year we see a rookie running back breakout. Right now he's going behind guys like Javonte Williams and Jalen Warren. If that price stays like that, like, yes, he's going to be on my team. I do expect it to rise, but I still even like him over guys like DeAndre Swift and David Montgomery and Zamir White, because I just think he has more upside than them. Maybe it won't be as pretty the first 5 weeks or so, but I do think in the second half of the season, he could truly break out. And I'm with you. Like, I don't really care to handcuff him all too much with Hubbard or Miles Sanders, because it's just not going to be that pretty if he does miss time. Now, Ja'Tavion Sanders, he's a rookie tight end drafted in the 4th round. So we cannot expect much from him, right, in his rookie season. But I do expect him to get a big share of the tight end snaps right away, because there's not a lot of competition there. His ADP right now is tight end 29. Like, he's not being drafted. But in terms of redraft, probably not going to be on your draft radar. But do you like him for dynasty leagues?
Yeah, absolutely like him for dynasty leagues, because I don't know what they're doing here with Tommy Tremble and all this other stuff on their depth chart here. So I really just do think he's a guy that we're going to stash. Tight ends typically need year 2 to really come through, especially a guy that a little bit disappointing at the combine. I think that's why he slid out of the first round consideration behind Brock Bowers. So, and maybe he has to get his speed and all that set, quickness, get the blocking down to stay on the field a little bit on this team. So I do like it. I mean, you haven't seen a lot of production of tight ends here with Dave Canales' teams, but K. Dotton had some flashes in terms of a downfield receiver, and that's what Sanders can do at a little bit higher level. And they still are figuring out the number 3 spot on this team in terms of who catches the ball on the inside. You'd think there would be a smooth transition a little bit from Thelen to Sanders when we go from 2024 to 25.
Yeah, I really like Sanders. I think he's a special talent. Watching him every week with Texas, like, he looked like the best player on the field on either offense, really, that I was ever watching. But I had the second most receptions and receiving yards among FBS tight ends over the last 2 seasons, only behind Brock Bowers. And he played through a high ankle sprain for a good majority of this season as well. And it still just didn't impact him that much. He's such a good player. I'm excited to see what he can do throughout his career. Now, if you're in Dynasty and you have to take a shot on one of these guys to sit on your bench for a little bit and hope they break out, would you rather go with Ja'Tavion Sanders or Michael Mayer, who was drafted in the 2nd round last year?
Well, I don't think you can go with Michael Mayer at all with Brock Bowers there, unfortunately, and I'm sad. But maybe they'll trade Michael Mayer and he'll end up in a good spot. I mean, I'm just disappointed for him. I've never seen that happen. I mean, really, it's a historically rare event to take a first-round tight end after taking the second-round tight end. So I think Sanders is going to be in a good spot here going forward. So I do like his potential definitely in this offense, but wait till 2025.
I just realized I'm wearing a Texas Longhorn shirt. I did not even do that on purpose. And when we're just talking about the 2 Texas Longhorn guys here, I may have to be a Carolina Panthers fan this year. We shall see. That is it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every dayers, Vinnie and I will be back next week, starting with AFC teams. We're probably going to start with the AFC North because I'm a Steelers homer and I want to get to them. But do not miss it. Have a great week. Bye, y'all.